الحمد لله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. First and foremost, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I find each one of you in good health, wealth, and iman. Secondly, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that any of us that have any worries, concerns, anxiety, sadness, depression, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He removes it and replaces it with His sakinah, with His tranquility and peace. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's blessed us all as Muslims with a beautiful legacy. A legacy that we should understand and we should learn. Matter of fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with such individuals in our legacy that we name our children after them. But sometimes the people that we're naming our children after, we don't know their stories, their journeys to Islam, their struggles, how they were before Islam, and when they accepted Islam, what they gave up, what they sacrificed for the sake of Islam. You know, I remember when I was studying in Pakistan, our scholars would always constantly share the story of a Sahabi. A particular Sahabi that I found a lot of inspiration from, a lot of motivation from, because at that age, when I was 17, 18 years old, you know, I wanted someone that I can compare my life to. Something that maybe I was going through a certain phase in my life, and this companion, he was going through that certain phase also. And this companion, this individual, this legacy of an individual, his name is Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him. You know, he has a beautiful story. His story is very inspirational. Matter of fact, we can learn a lot of lessons from it. Before Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed his family and himself with a lot of wealth. He grew up in extreme luxury. And you have to remember, 1400 years ago, if someone is wearing imported clothes, you must know that he must have been very wealthy. Matter of fact, his mother loved him so much, even his shoes were imported. They were from Yemen. The cologne he would wear, they say before he would enter a city, people would smell his cologne and they would know that this is Mus'ab ibn Umair. Matter of fact, the people of Quraysh, they were very proud that he was from their tribe because he was so good looking, so attractive. When he would pass by certain places, women would want to see him because he was so good looking. Women wanted to marry him. And you know, I compare that situation to now. A lot of the celebrities are known for these things now. You have a lot of wealth. You wear amazing clothes. You're very good looking. And matter of fact, if something happens to these celebrities, it doesn't matter whatever is happening in the world. If countries are getting blown up, if something bad happens to this celebrity, it's first page news. We know about their lives. And we're wondering why. Why do we need to know these people's lives? So in that time, he was considered a celebrity. He was very well known. And because he used to sit amongst the tribes of Quraysh, the leaders of Quraysh, there was these rumors going around that there is this person by the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's teaching people about Islam. So his curiosity led him to this place called Darul Arqam, which was pretty much like the first learning center of Islam. At that time, the Prophet ﷺ, openly, he wouldn't preach about Islam. All his Muslims would gather at this place, at this house, Darul Arqam, and the Prophet ﷺ, he would teach the companions. So Mus'ab ibn Umair, being young, being curious, he wanted to know what these people were learning. He goes to this house. He listens to the Prophet ﷺ. And after hearing a few of his talks, he realized this is what I was looking for. And he accepts Islam. Before I proceed in the story, this is a very interesting point. You know, as Muslims, we know there are certain things that are good for us, but we postpone in doing it. Because either when we think we're young, we realize, or we think that we're going to live on forever and we postpone it. We say, you know, I'm only 17, 18, I'll start praying my salah when I'm 40. Or I'll start becoming a better Muslim the next Ramadan. Because right now, I don't want to practice Islam, because if I start practicing Islam, I'm going to miss out on life. This is a lesson from Mus'ab ibn Umair. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait until Monday. Do it now. Do it now. Not knowing, you know, the companions would say, pray your salah as if what? As if it's your last salah. Why? Because we don't know what's going to happen when we leave outside. We don't know. There's always these interesting stories. You know, in Houston, there was this young girl who just graduated this past May or June. She just graduated, 22 years old, gets her degree. After the party that they had for her, getting her degree the next morning, she passes away. SubhanAllah. Don't wait until tomorrow to do something good. Do it right now. If you're not praying your salah, start doing it right now. If you don't have an attachment with the Quran, start having an attachment with the Quran right now. If you have a hard time going to the masjid, at least come to the masjid once a week. That's our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he accepts Islam. And he makes mashwara. He consults with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says that, look, my mother, because she's very wealthy, and she has a status in our tribe, if I tell her that I'm Muslim right now, she will not like it. The Prophet ﷺ, he advises them, don't tell your mother that you're Muslim right now. And there's some hikmah in that. You know, sometimes when we learn about Islam, and we get enough knowledge, and there's members and our family members who are not practicing, wallahi, the first words about Islam is in rahmah. What is it? Jahannam this, Jahannam that. If you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. And it's very negative and very aggressive, to the point that it pushes these people away. You know, our approach, or true knowledge, when we learn about knowledge, what does it do? It makes us humble. It makes us humble. And we need to know and learn how to speak to people properly. Because you know what happens? If the method is not right, what happens? It pushes people away. So at that time, he doesn't tell his mother that I've accepted Islam. But you know, when the truth is in you, when it's in your heart, you cannot hide it. His mother finds out that he's accepted Islam. So his mother calls him over, and the tribe leaders in his community are there, and they ask him, have you accepted Islam? And Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh says, yes, I've accepted Islam because it's the truth. So his mother got very upset. They say in the books that she was going to spear him or slap him. But she controlled it because she loved him so much. Here's something else that I want to add on to. You know, when our children, they get to a certain age, you can't force them to do anything. When they're 16, 17, 18 years old, and they're not becoming the Muslims that we thought they were going to be, we can't force them to do anything. There's a certain age that our children get to, and all we can do is at least make dua for them. You know, when Yusuf alayhi salam was thrown into the well, and his brothers came to Yaqub alayhi salam, You know, Yaqub alayhi salam, he knew what had happened, but he didn't hit his children. What did he do? He showed what? Patience. Or when Ibrahim alayhi salam had dua, when he had a dream that he's slaughtering his son, and he told this dream to his son that, look, I'm slaughtering you. What should I do? He doesn't tell his son, look, I'm going to slaughter you. You get ready tomorrow. We're going to take care of it. These are important things that we should understand, that your children, when they get to a certain age, you can't force them to do anything. We can't. The least that we can do is make dua for them, because what happens is that when we start abusing our children, you know, when they're young, they can't defend themselves. But when they get older, they remember that. And then don't be shocked when your children are 21, 22 years old and they don't want to have nothing to do with you because the way you treated them as children. And this is not according to the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, we know of this, how he treated his grandchildren, how he loved them and kissed them, how he was with them, how he interacted with the children in the community. So his mother, she gets upset, so what does she do? She holds them hostage in the house. She ties them to the house, some corner of the house, and she ties them up. And he's there for weeks. He's tied up so tight that he can't even scratch his face properly. So he finds out that a bunch of Muslims are migrating to Ethiopia, and some way and somehow he escapes and he migrates to Ethiopia. A few years later, they find out that, you know, the Muslims are okay in Makkah. It was a rumor. So he comes back to Makkah, but he realizes that the trials and tribulations of the Muslims of Makkah are still the same. They're getting abused, they're getting offended, they're getting harmed. It wasn't easy being Muslim in Makkah. So when his mother sees him, she asked him, my son, won't you leave this religion of Islam and come back to us? And he says, no, mother, I found the truth. And I encourage you to accept this religion too. It's a beautiful way of life. And she goes, no, I'm not going to leave the religion of my forefathers. And then out of anger, she says, you know what? I'm going to hold you hostage again and I'm not going to let you leave the house. But Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh, you know, a Muslim, he's confident, he isn't weak. He says to his mother, look, if you do that again, whoever's holding me hostage is not going to be good for him. And then she realized, you know, at this point, there's nothing I can do. And she's like, you can go. But remember this life of luxury that you live in, the cologne that you wear, the clothes that you wear, those imported shoes that you wear, I'm going to take that all away from you. And she took that from him. Matter of fact, while he was leaving this house, the house of his mother, his uncle saw him. And he said to Umar, Mus'ab ibn Umar, radiallahu anhu, he said that even the clothes that you're wearing, we own that too. Take that off right now. SubhanAllah, here's this young man who's leaving the house with no clothes. He had to cover his body. You know, he doesn't say, you know, an average 18, 19-year-old, he's like, okay, mom, let me pray salah sometimes, and at least let me keep some of the money. I won't do it all the way. He's not making a compromise. He's following through. And he leaves, and the Prophet ﷺ, he gives them some cloth. Now it's time to migrate to Medina. It's time to migrate to Medina. Because as we know, according to the seerah, how much the Muslims were going through in Makkah, such trials and tribulations. So the Prophet ﷺ, he needs to send an ambassador. Someone who will represent Islam beautifully. And something about Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh, he would recite the Quran beautifully. He would recite the Quran beautifully. You know, there's something about the Quran when it's recited with tajweed and it's recited with tartil. It shakes the hearts. You know, last night I was watching a video, a young Muslim boy. He goes in the middle of London in a marketplace and he's calling people over and he says, listen to the audio of the Quran to non-Muslims. And they're all listening to the Quran and they're saying that, Wallahi, I feel so much peace listening to the Quran. These are non-Muslims listening to the Quran, and they're saying that I feel so much at peace, so much at tranquility. So the Prophet ﷺ, he needs to send an ambassador. He could have sent Umar radiallahu anhu. He could have sent Ali radiallahu anhu. He could have sent Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Who does he send? An 18-year-old boy. A young man. Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu. It's funny, some of us, we have 18-year-old children. I've been 18 years old. I couldn't even hold a job for 3 months at that time. Sometimes we don't even want our 18-year-old doing chores because they can't even do it properly. Here's this 18-year-old boy that the Prophet ﷺ is saying, go to Medina and tell them about Islam. He goes to Medina and he's inviting people to Islam. And what was his invitation? He recites the Quran to them, people would listen. Everything was according to the Quran. He would recite Quran to them, and they would accept it. So one tribe leader of Medina, he found out that a lot of people in Medina are accepting Islam. And he goes to one of the halaqas of Mus'ab ibn Umair. And he goes to Mus'ab ibn Umair and he has a spear or an arrow. And he's holding it to his face. And he says to him, why are you trying to change everything in Medina? We liked it how it was before. Why are you spreading this oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He has this arrow in his face. He doesn't buckle under the pressure. He doesn't get angry. He tells the tribe leader, come and sit with me, let me explain Islam to you. He tells them about Islam. What does the tribe leader do? He accepts Islam, subhanAllah. Today, in the United States, today on Friday, there's this organization, they're doing these anti-Muslim rallies right now. Right now, at Jum'ah prayer, they're going to each of the masajids and they're saying terrible things. They have banners about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about Quran, about Allah, about Islam. Things that if we saw them, it would upset us. From this story, what are we learning? That we have to hold our composure. Last year in Arizona when they had that anti-Muslim rally, one of the musallis of that masjid told one of the rally members, come inside the masjid at least. See what we do. You hate us for no reason. You don't know who we are. One of the members of that rally, that anti-Muslim rally, he comes into the masjid. He listens to the sermon. And he says, what? Islam is amazing. I didn't know this about Islam. As Muslims, we all have an obligation to be true Muslims at school, at work, how we interact with the non-believers. It's an obligation upon us. Because they look at everything that we do. They look at everything that we do. SubhanAllah, when I went for Hajj, and there was a convert with me who had accepted Islam in jail. And this was back in year 2000. And at that time, during that time of Hajj, they would allow people to bring gallons of Zamzam water. Gallons, like 5-10 gallons of water of Zamzam. So in the Haram Sharif, they had 2 lines, one for the women and one for the men. And all the men, because the line was too long, all the men started going into the women's section. And for us, that's normal, back home, the way we drive, you just cut people and it's okay. It's okay. So I think we have the best drivers, alhamdulillah, because of that. But he sees this convert, Muslim, he sees all the men going into the women's section. And he said something below his breath, and I still remember it till this day. He said, Subhanallah, I'm thankful that I accepted Islam through reciting the Quran. Because if I were to accept Islam watching how Muslims act, I would have never accepted Islam. Our ikhlaq, our character has to be unique. So Mus'ab ibn Umair, he tells them about Islam, he shows them through his character, and that leader accepts Islam. Now all the Muslims have migrated to Medina. The Prophet ﷺ is in the masjid. He's telling the companions, he's giving them nasiha. And Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu, he walks in the masjid. All the companions look at him and then they put their head down out of pain and hurt. Because when they saw Mus'ab ibn Umair, what he was wearing, it broke their hearts. Have you ever seen a potato sack, that rough material, that brown type of bag? He's wearing 2 bags like that. And there's all these places where he's thrown in places because that cloth has ripped so many times. He's wearing these rough clothes. And the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they remember this is that same young man who wore imported clothes, who had a very luxurious life. And now he doesn't even have proper clothes. And the Prophet of Allah said, I remember those times when you had such an amazing life. You know, Islam, it doesn't want us to sacrifice everything. It wants us to sacrifice our time. It wants us to sacrifice our priorities. It wants us to sacrifice our talents and give it for the sake of Islam. You know, subhanAllah, I remember because my wife is from Arizona. I went to the masjids in Arizona. And after Salatul Asr, one brother, what does he do? He's a mathematics teacher. So after Salatul Asr, what does he do for all the community kids in that community? He's like, I'll teach everybody math, I'll tutor them for free. But one deal is that you come for Asr and you stay until Maghrib. SubhanAllah, 200 kids came. One brother from our masjid, Granada Hills Masjid, he goes, Junaid, all I know is how to play basketball. All I know is how to play basketball. So he says, okay, I'll teach the kids how to play basketball, but you have to come for Salatul Fajr. SubhanAllah, every Saturday, Sunday, 75 kids came to the masjid and prayed Salatul Fajr. Give your talents for the sake of Islam. You know, so many, it's a internet world. We have so many programmers and they make beautiful websites. Give it for the sake of Islam. Donate your time to the masjid. It's all for the sake of Islam. You know, I know time is passing on, but in the battle of Uhud, Mus'ab ibn Umair, he's made shaheed. He passes away, he's made shaheed in that battle. And when the Prophet ﷺ was looking, he was going in the battlefield and he was finding all of the companions. One was his uncle Hamza radiallahu anh. So many companions passed away, and when they went up to Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh, SubhanAllah, all of the companions were crying. Because in that time, whenever a person would pass away, they would bury him in the clothes that they were wearing. So when they were trying to bury Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh, when they would cover his head, his feet would show. And when they would cover his feet, his head would show. So the Prophet of Allah, the companion said, what should we do? How should we bury him? So the Prophet of Allah said, cover his head and put grass over his feet. And the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, he said, amongst the believers are men who are true to their covenant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of us have made that covenant when we read La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. But are we fulfilling that covenant? That oath that we've taken with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I bring this up because our children, they're growing up in a society where they need role models. They need superheroes. There's nothing wrong with loving a certain basketball player. But when we start looking into these individual lives, you'll always find something that you will never like. I grew up in the 90s. I love Magic Johnson. But in 1992, I remember it till this day when he made an announcement that he has HIV. It broke my heart. But if we were to read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, there's nothing about him that would make us put our heads down. It would put our heads up. If we were to read the biography of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, all of these individuals, they would give us pride. I asked my own son, do you know who Osman is? He goes, I don't know, but I know who Iron Man is. I know who Captain America is. I know who Thor is. And I know who this and this and this. When these beings that I'm going to mention are children, matter of fact, all of us, we should know them. Who Umar, radiallahu an, Uthman radiallahu an, Ali radiallahu an, Zayd bin Sabit radiallahu an, Aisha radiallahu anha, Fatima radiallahu anha. What do these names mean to us? It has to be just more than we name our children after them. We need to know their stories. Because from their stories we find inspiration, motivation, and a means in getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we know our legacy. We know our history. Because when we know our legacy and our history, it gives us the ability to be our best. Be our best in what? Be the best Muslim. Ameen. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'an al-azim. ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. أقم الصلاة.